We, the people of the land on earth called America, in order to form a more perfect union with all peoples and places of the world, establish justice by the cause of the Declaration of Independence, the education of natural law, to secure the blessings of liberty for all peoples, for our prosperity, do utilize this written material in acknowledgement for the constitution of humankind and their actions in relation to natural law. Article 1, Section 1. No legislative powers can be granted to any individual or group of individuals, whether from themselves or others, as all humans are born with the same rights under natural law, and no human has the power to delegate or revoke rights that do not exist in nature. Thus, there can be no Congress or House of Representatives. Section 2. All voting processes that involve forcible control or imposition upon those who oppose what is being voted is not voluntary, and thus violates the freedom of individuals under natural law to live their life as they so choose by free will. Every person has a voice to share upon the matters of the world they live in, as it is freedom of speech, a natural human right. All individuals on earth constitutes a free peoples, simply inhabiting the land of which they live, able to freely live their life as they so choose by free will. No taxes shall be imposed upon any populace unless it is a consensual and voluntary choice of an individual to do so, but this would distinctively be charity, donation, and fundraising as opposed to taxation. Taxation is the claim that a group of people who call themselves government have been given the right to confiscate an arbitrarily chosen percentage of the product of another individual's labor, a form of property, whether or not the other agrees to share that product voluntarily. Taxation is enforced by the threat of violence, behavior resulting in bodily harm, or imprisonment, the taking away of physical freedom of movement. If peoples from whom the product is being seized attempt to resist the confiscation. This practice is always justified, made into a right, by peoples who claim that such a practice is necessary and required to uphold the common good. If we define slavery as the involuntary confiscation of 100% of the product of the labor of another human being, we can clearly see that there is no percentage to which we can lower this number other than 0% that would no longer constitute slavery. Taxation is merely a euphemism for theft, violence, and slavery, the practices upon which it is actually based. Since no individual anywhere on earth has the right to claim ownership of the product of another person's labor, such behavior can never be delegated to a group and called a right. Therefore, all forms of taxation are always wrong according to natural law. There is no such thing as the right to rule over another human being. If peoples are truly equal, then no human being can be in a position where they proclaim to have more rights than other human beings. In other words, it is not natural or moral for slavery or the ownership of another individual in his property to be of existence. The only state is the state of nature. This is considered reality. The only government is self-government, for an individual governing himself. Section 3. There shall be no master plan for humanity, as it would be one individual's will over another individual. Free will belongs with every individual for himself. This also means there can be no common good or people's party or people's government of any kind, unless it is fully consensual and voluntary. There can be no president or minister or king or master, as by natural law ownership, an individual owns their own body and their own rights, both forms of property. An individual owns himself, another individual owns themselves. Since all actions in life are of freedom and are voluntary, an individual can opt out of any action shall they choose. Section 4. No elections can take place. Since there is no such thing as the right to rule, there is no such thing as a law created by man, since law by definition means, quote, an existing condition which is binding and immutable. meaning it cannot be changed. Man's law is also never universal or eternal. It is based upon beliefs and opinions, complied with due to fear of punishment. It can never be natural law. If a particular man-made law is in harmony with natural law, then it follows logically that it is redundant, since it is stating a truth that is inherent, pre-existing, and self-evident. Therefore, it is both irrelevant and unnecessary. If a particular man-made law is in opposition to natural law, then it follows logically that it is both false or incorrect and immoral or harmful, or in other words, wrong. Therefore, it cannot be legitimately binding upon anyone. Section 5. All actions are of the people, by the people, and therefore truly for the people. There can only be people in their actions, each action being governed by natural law, the real authority providing consequences to behavior for manifesting aggregate order as opposed to chaos. Section 6. No human being has the right to tell another human being how to live their life. By coercion and forcibly violent control, as such would constitute a mandate or command, a claim of ownership over another person, known as slavery or the lack of true freedom. Section 7. There shall be no clever means of slavery or forcible control over anyone, just because it may be expressed using different words. Natural law moral principles remain intact regardless of time, location, and popular opinion. Section 8, as by Section 2, no one has the right to tax another person regardless of the intent, as the action remains inherently immoral and wrong by natural law. The use of the words common defense or general welfare do not account for specific actions, and thus cannot be used as a justification if theft is theft, no matter for any greater good. And being that society is perfectly capable of living and thriving without such theft, utilizing voluntary interactions, privatized businesses, and responsibilities naturally obligated by nature. We shall recognize that freedom provides possibility, including the ability to be creative so that sciences will grow abundantly. We shall recognize that war is never moral, and will not occur in a free society where conflicts are minuscule as opposed to those done in the name of following orders for authority, and that if there must be people defending their land, they will bring awareness to the issue. Every individual naturally has the freedom and right to self-defense, as by the self-defense principle, but by no means has the right to commit a form of aggression against someone who has done no harm, as by the non-aggression principle. If man is to decide what is necessary for others, backing it by threat of violence, he is imposing his will and opinion on others, where those others may feel the need to obey and may become convinced to obey in order for the imposition of will to grow in power, until power ultimately and inevitably corrupts and creates chaos. The consent of the people having a government would mean government is voluntary and not backed by violence for compliance. It would simply be voluntary cooperation. Authority cannot be vested in certain human beings, magically giving them the right to rule over other people. This authority would mean that certain people, who we call government, have the moral right to issue commands to those whom they rule, those under their jurisdiction, and that their subjects or slaves have a moral obligation to obey the arbitrary dictates or laws set by their masters or rulers. This belief in authority legitimizes the existence of covert slavery, as it is dressed by political propaganda. Section 9. When power is granted to individuals through authority via statism, this power, by its nature, will expand and become the most powerful force on earth, as the idea of certain human beings having more rights than others is seen as legitimate. There then exists no power above government that can limit it. Thus, authority has no rulers for itself, which allows its freedom in inevitably continuing to expand so long as it exists. Since it writes the laws, it considers itself above the law. No piece of paper or man-made constitution can limit it in any form, as government is just people. People's actions determine what manifests, but such would imply that they are sovereign to do so, not of governance by other people, giving reason for countless attempts of humanity's independence from governments to creating new governments, creating the same chaotic cycles with no embraced circulation and application of natural law in the state of nature. Section 10, as by Section 9, no state can be limited. No state has full consent of its people unless it is not a state. No state isn't man-made. Everything man-made is imperfect and bound to fail, as by Section 4. Man's law is not universal or eternal. It is based upon beliefs and opinions. What some people cannot do, told by other men, is irrelevant if those some people are given the authority to put into law what they can do, being fellow men. Everyone has the right to do many things, but nobody has the right to do wrongs, which can become easily known by natural law as any form of theft or harmful behavior that creates a victim. Article 2, Section 1, as by Article 1, Section 1 and Section 2. Rulers and masters can never exist and persist in any form possible, so long as natural law exists, there being no right to rule, and people self-governing themselves is naturally embraced. Majority rule by vote creates forcible imposition upon the minority, thus violating individual free will choice. Section 2. No human shall have the vested authority or power over other human beings, if true equality is to manifest. Everyone has the same exact rights. No one has any more or less rights than anyone else. Also, since rights are not created by humanity, and since they are the birthright of humanity gifted to us by nature, no human being or group of human beings is actually capable of granting rights to anyone else, nor is any human being capable of revoking rights from anyone else. Section 3. Change is never dependent upon only one person. One person does not have the power to do things that other people cannot do. If people have special talents and expertise, so their natural leadership and influence shall not be as a means of power through control of other peoples. Section 4. Individuals always maintain the right to involve themselves in any affairs of which they choose, so long as they do not cause harm to others or commit and permit wrongdoings. This also means easily being able to opt out of situations, using self-defense and voluntary interactions as demonstrated by Article 1, Section 8. Article 3, Section 1. People shall freely go about with their fruits of their labor and make trades with one another. Private court systems, just like private security systems, can be set up accordingly to the needs of the populace. Section 2. Natural law extends to all places at all times, simply dependent upon human understanding, to action abidance based on principles and truth, inherent to creation, immutable, meaning it cannot be changed. Section 3. No victim, no crime. All wrongdoings are forms of crimes, creating a victim, a form of theft. Murder, assault, rape, theft, trespass, coercion, and willfully lying. These are handled by natural justice, natural law, and people with their technology, tools, and networks, carried out by the many workings of karma or consequentialism, solutions more and more effective, without a centralized, no competition, man's law enforcement system, which often disregards morality, allows criminal exceptions, and produces counterintuitive results. Article 4, Section 1. With technology, communication, and knowledge, for the understanding and application of natural law, peoples will be able to maintain order through the generations and worldwide. Section 2. There shall be no man-made permissions or granting created for an individual exercising a natural right freely, as it is their right action to take regardless of any whim. Section 3. States and countries in the world are representative for the landmass through which history and travelers have identified, not to be taken literally, but simply for identification, as does most people who already use in reference to the area names as a means for travel and trade. Society persists and recognizes to fully rule thyself, as exampled in many taken for granted present societal actions. Section 4. Free peoples of the world shall guarantee self-ownership, thus real self-government in the form of true freedom, embraced, with all the possibilities, including that of chaos, in reducing overall harm manifestation done in the name of authority, following orders, and power alike, to never institutionalize slavery, create democide, or manifest a monopoly of violence. Peoples shall defend one another against aggressors, as by Article 1, Section 8, one always maintains the natural right to self-defense, no special uniform or title or piece of paper necessary for its application. Article 5. Man's law, subjective in nature, is bound to be in need of improvements and criticisms, and thus the populace is never truly, fully content. The populace never fully, truly consents. Over time, the written pieces of paper become confusing and more clearly unnatural to standard living. There is no lengthy or complex process in natural law, as only understanding, as recognition of it, once in general public circulation, is necessary. Events play out naturally, where truth rises to the top. Nobody is acting as truth itself or dictating how all events should play out according to their whim. Article 6. No single man's law can be the law of the land, as only the law of the land can be the law of the land. Natural law overrides all actions of human beings, being the only law, as it is natural, as by law's own definition from Article 1, Section 4, and defined as being derived from nature, inherent, having basis in reality and truth, not created by humankind. Article 7. The sharing of this knowledge shall be sufficient for the recognition of these words representing inheritance between all peoples of the world intended to be free.